All right, happy Halloween, guys. Here we are trying to finish up the classical ages. Here's a quick review of ancient Greece. And the ancient Greeks combine three different cultures. First, out in the middle of the Mediterranean, we have the Minoans on the island of Crete, named for their famous king Minos. And the Minoans are pretty exciting. The palace there, if it was fully excavated, is giant. It would have over 800 rooms. It was more of a city than it was a palace. And what we know from the remnants of it, you can see here it was brilliantly painted like aqua and like red and purple and green, is that they left these giant frescoes, which are wet plaster that's painted, and so when it dries it has this rocky hard texture and shell, like Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel. And what we could tell from the ancient Minoans, right in the middle of the Mediterranean between Europe and North Africa, is that they were fairly peaceful. Looking at these frescoes, we see many scenes of daily life. Such things as the women had a high level of rights and responsibilities. We know that they weren't organized for defense whatsoever, probably because they were a trading safe haven for people traveling between Asia, Europe, and Africa. And they had that very interesting rite of passage into adulthood, doing the front flip over the charging bull. Well, the peaceful Minoans were conquered in about 1400 BC by a group of people from the mainland, the Mycenaeans, who, as we know, weren't so very nice. And the Mycenaeans were warriors from the mainland who will have a very powerful but short-lived kingdom from 1400 to around 1200 BC. They conquer Crete, and they are most famous for being led by their king Agamemnon. Now, King Agamemnon had a brother in Sparta named Menelaus, who was married to a beautiful woman supposedly named Helen. And during a trading negotiation with two princes of the Turkish city, or Asia Minor city of Troy, Queen Helen fell in love with young Prince Paris and snuck back with him back to the big city of Troy on the coast of the Aegean Sea, guarding the Dardanelles. And so this supposedly launched the Trojan War. Helen was the face that launched 1,000 ships as Agamemnon pledged to get revenge for his brother and bring Helen back. Well, that's a great story. But the real reason for the war between the Trojans and the Mycenaeans was probably a turf trading war over trading rights with the Black Sea. And so here's the city of Mycenae, built high up on this hill. As you go in through this walkway, you get to this funnel by the famous Lion's Gate, the only way into this city. And after 10 years of war, one of Agamemnon's good buddies, Odysseus, came up with the Trojan Horse, the wooden horse trick. The Trojans, thinking their enemy is gone, bring in the gift to Poseidon into the city. We all know what happens. The Greeks pile out of the Trojan horse, they unlock the gates, and the Trojans are defeated. King Agamemnon goes home victorious after 10 years, but his wife supposedly quickly kills him. He was gone for 10 years, and to ensure victory, he sacrificed his daughter. Now, for many years, we thought this was just a myth, and then in the 1870s, a German mining engineer named Heinrich Schliemann was snowed in a cabin looking for more ore deposits to mine, and he ran into the Iliad and the Odyssey. He sells his mining interests and buys a yacht, and he and his wife sail around the Mediterranean. Finally, in 1871, he discovers the ruins of Troy. Now, the first city he found was too young to be the Greek Troy, so he kept excavating. Remember, he was a miner, not an archaeologist. He destroys many priceless artifacts, but near the bottom, the 9th city, he finds artifacts matching the date and the time, so we know that the war happened. Schliemann then goes over here to Mycenae. he finds Agamemnon's burial mound and his golden death mask. And so the Mycenaeans will be conquered by a group of Indo-Europeans from the mainland, known as Dorians. Dora, on the map, I'm the map, I'm the map. And they followed the map all the way from southern Russia, kind of the same group that went over into India and settled India. And the Dorians are invaders. They quickly conquer the Mycenaeans, and this ushers in what is known as the Greek Dark Ages. For the first time in history, learning ceased to increase. Matter of fact, it didn't increase, it actually rolled backward or regressed, as Greece falls into an early version of the Middle Ages of Europe. And it'll stay that way for the better part of 500 years, being illiterate and separated until the great poet Homer will write down, is credited with writing down the great epic tales of the Iliad and the Odyssey, the stories of the Trojan War and Odysseus' journey to get back home. It is during this time that the Greeks will split into many different city-states. Now they're all Greek, they speak the same language, they eat the same foods, they worship the same gods, but the geography of Greece is very mountainous. It's hill and mountain and hill and mountain. It was very difficult to travel in ancient Greece. Very similar to traveling up the turnpike through West Virginia to this very day. You're up, down, and around. You're up, down, and around. It's very difficult to make any time. So the Egyptians settled on the water. And because they were not out of sight of land for very long, traveling with Asia and even Africa, they become expert sailors. And these cities become isolated little communities that function as independent little countries. And the Greek city-states couldn't stand each other. They had this ultra-competitive rivalry between the two. And this led to a lot of rivalry. The farmland was very difficult. There was a lot of competition for resources, so the Greeks fought constantly. Now the cities had the same layout. In the very middle was a giant Acropolis, or a city on a hill, where there was the temple to the main chief god or goddess of the city, surrounded by freshwater wells, some food, some minor temples, and it was the last line of defense if there was ever an attack. Below that was the middle area. It's where a lot of the artisans and the merchants conducted business. It's where the amphitheaters were. It was the area where everybody interacted and blended together. And outside of it was another defensive wall. And then you went down to the lower parts of the city and the city gate out into the countryside where the farmers were. So one of the reasons we have our modern day social class system, lower class, middle class, and upper class, was where you were located on the ancient Greek Acropolis. This is how things went on. So the Greeks, as I said, became expert sailors, and due to their climate, they spent a lot of time outdoors. And in these city-states, 15 to like 30,000, you might not know everybody, but you knew someone who did. So think of your neighborhoods or the next door neighbor, Facebooky type thing. Everybody knew each other, and the Greeks traded. Here is another look at the ancient Acropolis, the most famous one of which is in ancient Athens. And the word polis simply means city-state. Each city-state operated on its own system. The governments varied. In some of the city-states, they were governed by monarchies. Some were governed by aristocracies, or oligarchies, a rich but powerful few running the show. Some were run by aristocracies, a few very wealthy, rich landowners. But even though they were oligarchies and aristocracies, there was more than one voice. There wasn't just one person running the show. And right around 750 BC, right around the time of Homer, the Greek population began to get too big to feed itself. So the Greeks start setting up colonies overseas, from as far away as Spain down to Egypt, and over here in Asia Minor and Turkey is where it's going to begin to cause a problem. Because as the Greeks expanded, they didn't realize they were encroaching on other empires, especially over here in Persia. And so here's a look at the ancient Greek governmental system. Early on, it was governed by monarchies, or ruled by one single individual. But the ancient Greeks were different than a lot of other people. To maintain weapons and armor, it cost a lot of money. So the king would ask his nobles to go out with him and help fight these wars. And the nobles said, wait a minute there, king, you need us a lot more than we need you. So we want political representation. And the kings were forced to give in to an oligarchy, a rule by a rich, powerful few. But over time, as the Greeks began trading with Egypt and with Italy and Mesopotamia, the merchants and the traders became very wealthy. And they said, hey, why don't we get a say in the political process? We have a lot of money, we're influential, we want a say in the government, and so we get an aristocracy, a rule by a rich, powerful few. But one city-state in particular is going to have a long process where they will give birth to the world's first democracy, and that is in ancient Athens. And in ancient Athens, over a couple 100-year period of time, we get four main reformers who worked for the good of everybody. Number one is the Archon, and an Archon is a city father, someone who directed the day-to-day operations of the city. And the Archon Draco, I think of Draco Malfoy, took a page from Hammurabi's book where he codified Athenian law. He made it equal for all people. Unlike Hammurabi, there weren't differences between rich and poor. Everybody was treated the same. Rich or poor, it didn't matter. The laws applied equally for everybody. This may not seem like a really big step, but in the ancient world, it really was. Rich and poor are being treated alike. Several years after Draco, we get the Archon named as Solon. Now, Solon got rid of a thing known as debt slavery. This is when Brooks Biscuits and, Ethan's Biscuits, Bot's Biscuits, were kicked out of business, right? Debt slavery happened when you could not pay your bills. When you couldn't pay your bills, you were forced to sell yourself into slavery for a period of time. A month, 3 months, 6 months, a year. But greedy Greeks were able to devise a way to keep their fellow citizens perpetually in slavery, and they gobbled up their businesses. Well, Solon comes in and he frees those in debt slavery. He says, look, this just can't happen. Athenians can't do this to Athenians. He outlawed the practice of debt slavery and said this can no longer happen. And he also extended citizenship to more people. Athenian citizenship was very, very highly restricted. And he said, if you have a business, if you have a service, why wouldn't we want you to come in and help us? We can benefit from it and we can tax it. Shortly after Solon comes a guy named Pisistratus, and Pisistratus is my favorite. The ideas that President Roosevelt used during the Great Depression come directly from him. Pisistratus said, yeah, Solon freed those in debt slavery, and he outlawed the practice of debt slavery, but we have a lot of unemployed Athenians. Poor Brooke and poor Ethan still can't get their jobs back. So he created public works projects where Athenians worked for the city. They built new theaters. They built new temples. They built defensive walls. Beginning of the day, there was nothing. There was a flat foundation. And then things get, built up. You can see progress. There was nothing at the beginning of the day, and now you've got a 3 or 4 foot wall. The people who want to work hard are working hard. They see progress, and they're getting paid. And they take that paycheck, they go out into the public, and they spend it. And they begin to generate a greater income throughout Athens. So the money that the city-state pays up front, they get it back plus more. It's where Julius Caesar and President Roosevelt get the ideas from. And finally, we get Cleisthenes. Cleisthenes created what is known as the Council of 500. He looked around Athens and saw the city-state getting bigger, and he wanted equal representation for all people. So he divided Athens up into 10 different voting districts. And 50 people from each district would have their name drawn out of like a bingo hopper, and they would serve a 1-year term in the Athenian assembly. They quit their job, they were paid a governmental salary, and when that 1-year term was up, they went back to their normal job and 50 new people came in. That way, everybody in Athens was represented. Their interests were definitely heard. This is how it worked for quite a long time. Everyone, and you could not serve a second term in the assembly until everybody in your district had one opportunity. The Athenians and all the Greeks, really loved and sought after political participation. You had to want it. You had to be involved in the running of your city-state. And so that's how things go until the Athenians get way too big. And they have a big city-state, but their ability to feed themselves runs out. And so the Athenians are going over here in Greece, are going to go up against the mighty Persian Empire, extending from modern-day India, Pakistan, down to Egypt, up into the Caucasus Mountains of southern Russia. It was a mighty empire. But Athens couldn't feed itself, so they had some of their people go over to the coast of what is today Turkey, known as the Ionian coast, and there they set up colonies. They built shipping ports and facilities to grow food and send it back to Athens. Problem is, it belonged to the great Persian king Darius or Darius. The Greeks didn't ask permission. And they begin to set up these settlements in these villages, and then Darius hears about it. And he goes over with his army and says, hey, what are you guys doing? Oh, well, we're building cities, and we're building villages, and we're building towns. And he said, well, you guys didn't ask me. Well, who are you? What do you mean, who am I? I'm King Darius. I'm the guy whose land you're in. Oh, well, like there was nobody here, and we're Athenians. Well, what do you mean? Where's Athens? Well, it's over in Greece, and we're Athenian citizens. We're just in a suburb, and so part of the food we grow, we give it to our mother city-state. What do you mean you give it to them? Well, like we just give it to them for free? You're growing food in my land that you just hand away for free? What the heck is wrong with you guys? And they're like, but, we didn't see that there was anything wrong with this. And so Darius goes completely and totally bonkers. And he says, whatever food you give to Athens, you give the same to me in taxes. And that's how things go for a while, but Athens gets greedy and they ask for more food. Darius gets his amount increased. The Athenians ask for more food. Darius increases his amount until the poor colonists over here in Turkey cannot pay Darius his taxes and give Athens the amount that they want. And so they're forced to tell somebody no, and so they tell Darius no. We're going to, go ally ourselves with our mother city-state. Sorry, Darius, you're in the cold. And he's like, how dare you? Do you not know who I am? He said, that's it. Saddle up. We're coming to conquer you. I'm going to wipe you from the face of my empire. And the city-state of Athens had the audacity to send ships and weapons to help fight King Darius. Not men, but ships and weapons. And that is what will start off tomorrow's review, the Great Persian Wars between the Greeks and the Persians. Thanks, guys. Please listen to this so you can do well on your quiz.